My father's secret notebook revealed the man he truly was beneath his harsh exterior. I spent 30 years hating a man I never understood. My father was a fortress of silence, impossible to please, cold in ways that made me question if he even wanted me. Every achievement I earned was met with a nod. Every failure is disappointing. Every attempt to connect with a wall I couldn't climb. I stopped trying years ago. And then he died. And then I found the notebook. 32 years of words he never said, love he couldn't show, apologies written in the dark hours when no one was watching. It destroyed me. Not because he was cruel, but because he was broken. And I never knew the difference. Welcome to my Reddit diaries, where every story reveals the unseen battles within families. Don't forget to subscribe and tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? The rain started during the eulogy. I remember that. The way it tapped against the church windows like it was trying to get in, or maybe trying to get out. I stood in the third row, wearing the black suit I'd bought 2 days earlier because I didn't own one. Funerals weren't something I'd planned for. Neither was this. My father died at 63. Heart attack. Quick and clean, they said, like that made it better. The priest was saying things I didn't recognize. Words like devoted and principled and beloved. I looked around the church at the faces nodding in agreement, strangers mostly, people from his work, his neighborhood, the veterans group he attended every Thursday. They were crying. Actually crying. And I stood there dry-eyed and numb, wondering if we were burying the same man. Because the father they described wasn't the one I knew. Mine was the man who checked his watch at my soccer games. The one who said, "That's nice," without looking up when I showed him my first painting. The one who missed my gallery opening because of a work emergency that I later learned never existed. He'd been at home that night. Alone. Like always. I was 10 the first time I realized my father didn't love me. We'd won the championship game. I scored the winning goal in the last 30 seconds, and the entire team piled on top of me, screaming and laughing. I remember climbing out of that pile and searching the bleachers for his face. I found him. He was standing, already heading for the parking lot, checking his watch. He had work in the morning. That's what he told me on the drive home. No congratulations. No celebration. Just silence and the radio playing something I don't remember. At 16, I painted my first real piece. Not the childish stuff from art class, but something I'd worked on for 3 months. Oceans and storms and all the emotion I couldn't say out loud. I brought it to him while he was reading the newspaper at the kitchen table. I remember my hands shaking. I remember thinking maybe this would be different. Maybe art would be the language he understood. He glanced at it for maybe 3 seconds. "That's nice, Marcus." Then back to the newspaper. I stood there holding this piece of my soul, waiting for more. Anything more. But he just turned the page and sipped his coffee, and I learned that day that some people don't want to see you. They just want you to stop blocking their view. By the time I was 24 and had my first real gallery opening, I'd stopped hoping. I invited him anyway because that's what you do. You invite your father to important things even when you know he won't come. He sent a text 3 hours before the opening. "Can't make it. Work emergency." I stared at that text for 10 minutes, then deleted it and got drunk enough to forget that the empty chair with his name on it had ever existed. The last 5 years were mostly silent. Phone calls on holidays that lasted 3 minutes. "How are you? How's work? Fine. Okay then. Take care." The kind of conversations you have with strangers at bus stops. The kind that mean nothing and change nothing and exist only because someone decided they should. And now he was dead. The funeral ended. People shook my hand and said things like, "Sorry for your loss, and he was a good man, and if you need anything." I nodded and said thank you and felt nothing. My sister Sarah stood beside me, efficient and composed, shaking hands like this was a business meeting. She hadn't cried either. She was 48 years older than me, and had perfected the art of not feeling things a long time ago. "We should go to the house," she said as the last mourner left. Sort through his things. I didn't want to. Going back to that house meant confronting 30 years of memories I'd spent a decade trying to forget. But she was already walking to her car, already assuming I'd follow, and I did because that's what I always did with Sarah. She'd raised me more than either parent had after Mom left. I owed her that much. 3 days later, I stood in front of my childhood home. It looked smaller than I remembered. The paint was peeling. The lawn needed mowing. The whole place had the feeling of somewhere time had forgotten. I used my key and stepped inside. It smelled like him. Coffee and old books and something else I couldn't name. Loneliness, maybe. The kind that settles into walls. The house was a museum of his life. Diplomas on the walls. Certificates of achievement. Awards from work. Everything organized and sterile and cold. No family photos. No warmth. Just evidence of a life lived in straight lines and right angles. I walked through rooms I hadn't entered in over a decade. The kitchen where we ate dinner in silence. The living room where he read newspapers while I did homework. The hallway where I used to stand outside his study, wondering what he did there for hours every night. The study. I'd never been allowed in as a child. It was his space, his sanctuary, the one room where he could close the door and we'd know not to disturb him. After Mom left when I was 12, he spent even more time there. Sometimes I'd wake up at 2 in the morning and see the light under his door, hear the scratch of pen on paper. I stood outside that door now, 32 years old, and still felt like I was breaking a rule by turning the handle. The room was exactly as I remembered. Dark wood, leather chair worn in the seat, bookshelves floor to ceiling. His desk sat in front of the window, looking out at the backyard where I used to play alone while he worked inside. Everything was neat, organized, controlled. I sat in his chair. It felt wrong. Like wearing a dead man's clothes before they're cold. I started opening drawers, not sure what I was looking for. Financial documents. Old tax returns. Instruction manuals for appliances we no longer owned. The bottom right drawer jammed when I tried to pull it. I yanked harder and something inside shifted. The drawer came loose and behind it, I saw a gap in the desk's backing. A loose panel. My hands moved before my brain caught up. I pulled the panel away. Behind it was a notebook. Leather, worn at the edges, the kind you buy intending to use for something important. I pulled it out. It was heavier than it looked. Used. Filled. I opened to the first page. The handwriting was my father's, but softer somehow. Less rigid than the angry notes he'd leave about chores or curfews. More careful. More human. The date was 32 years ago. The day I was born. I held him today. He's so small. I'm terrified I'll break him. I'm terrified I'll break everything, the way my father broke me. My heart stopped. This didn't sound like him. This didn't sound like the man who raised me. I turned the page. More entries. Dozens of them. Hundreds. The notebook wasn't a diary. It was letters. Letters to me. Unspoken. 32 years of words he never said. I found one dated the week after the soccer championship. I wanted to hug you today, but my father's voice was in my head. Men don't coddle. I'm so sorry, son. I'm trying to protect you from weakness, but I'm only teaching you to hate me. Another from when I was 16. Your painting took my breath away. I saw oceans and storms and emotion I've spent my whole life trying to contain. You have a gift I'll never understand. You can express what I can only bury. I'm so proud of you, and so envious. One more from the night of my gallery opening. I drove to your gallery 3 times tonight. Parked outside. Watched you through the window, surrounded by people who understand you in ways I never could. I couldn't go in. What if I said the wrong thing? What if I made you uncomfortable on your special night? So I left. I'm a coward, Marcus. You deserved better. My hands were shaking. The notebook fell open to more pages. More letters. More apologies. More love confessed in words he could never speak aloud. Every moment of coldness had a letter. Every silence had an explanation. Every wall had been a prison he built to protect me from something worse. I sat on the floor of his study, surrounded by 30 years of a father I never knew, and finally understood why some people can't show love even when they feel it. Because showing it means being vulnerable. And being vulnerable means risking the kind of pain that shaped them. My father wasn't cold because he didn't love me. He was cold because love terrified him. And now he is gone. And I'd never tell him I understood. I'd never tell him it was okay. I'd never tell him I forgave him. I'd never tell him I loved him too. The tears came then. Not the polite tears you cry at funerals. The kind that break you open. The kind you've been holding back for 30 years because you thought you weren't allowed to grieve someone who never let you in. But he had let me in. Just not the way I'd needed. Not in time. I looked down at the notebook in my hands, at decades of silent love, and realized the cruelest truth of all. Sometimes understanding someone fully only happens after they're gone. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The notebook sat on the desk in front of me, and I read every page. Every letter. Every apology he never sent. Every moment of pride he never voiced. 32 years of a man I thought I knew, revealing himself to be someone completely different. The coffee I'd made at midnight had gone cold hours ago. Dawn was breaking through the study window, painting the room in gray light, and I was still reading. There was a letter from when I was 12. The year Mom left. Your mother begged me to change, to open up, to be warmer. I didn't know how. She said I was punishing you with my silence. She's right. I'm doing to you what was done to me. But I don't know another way. I love you so much it frightens me. I remembered that year. The fights they'd have behind closed doors. Mom's suitcases by the front door. Her face when she knelt down and told me she had to leave, that it wasn't my fault, that she still loved me. I remembered watching her car pull away and turning to find my father standing in the doorway. I'd wanted him to say something. Anything. To explain why she was leaving or promise it would be okay. He just cleared his throat and said, "Dinner's at 6. Don't be late." I hated him for that. For years, I hated him for that moment. But here in his handwriting was the truth. He hadn't known what to say. Hadn't known how to comfort. had been raised by a man who taught him that emotion was weakness and comfort was coddling. I found another letter dated when I was 16. The painting. Your painting took my breath away. I saw oceans and storms and emotion I've spent my whole life trying to contain. You have a gift I'll never understand. You can express what I can only bury. I'm so proud of you, and so envious. That's nice, Marcus. 3 words. That's all he'd given me that day. But here, alone in his study where no one could see, he'd written paragraphs. He'd felt everything I'd wanted him to feel. He just couldn't say it. The gallery opening had its own letter too. I drove to your gallery 3 times that night. Parked outside. Watched you through the window, surrounded by people who understand you in ways I never could. I couldn't go in. What if I said the wrong thing? What if I made you uncomfortable on your special night? So I left. I'm a coward, Marcus. You deserved better. I'd gotten drunk that night because the empty chair with his name on it had felt like rejection. But he'd been there, watching from the parking lot like some kind of ghost, too afraid of his own inadequacy to walk through the door. Every moment of coldness corresponded to a letter of overwhelming emotion. The pattern was clear now. My father's silence wasn't absence. It was suppression. A lifetime of pushing down everything he felt because he'd been taught that feeling was failing. Several letters mentioned his own father. My grandfather. A man who died before I was born. Fragments of a cruel childhood emerged from the pages. A military man who believed affection made boys weak. Who punished emotional displays with isolation and shame. Who sent his 8-year-old son to military boarding school and visited once a year if he felt like it. There was one entry about the day my father's mother died. He was 9. He cried in the dormitory and his father showed up the next day, not to comfort him, but to punish him publicly for his tears. Men don't cry, his father had said, then left him there for another year without visiting. My father had been trying to break that cycle. In his mind, being less cruel meant being better. He didn't understand there was a middle ground between his father's brutality and his own silence. He thought if he wasn't harsh, wasn't violent, wasn't punishing, that would be enough. But children don't need the absence of pain. They need the presence of love. The front door opened downstairs. I heard footsteps. Sarah's voice calling my name. Marcus? You here? I couldn't answer. My throat was too tight. She found me sitting on the floor of the study, the notebook open in my lap, my eyes red from crying. Jesus, did you sleep at all? She set down her purse and looked at me with that mixture of concern and exasperation she'd perfected over 40 years. You look like hell. I found something. My voice came out rough. You need to read this. I held up the notebook. She took it carefully, suspiciously, like it might bite. Started reading the first page. Then the second. I watched her face change. Saw the moment she understood what she was holding. Dad wrote this? Every word. She kept reading. Flipping pages. Her jaw tight. Her shoulders tense. I waited for the tears. For the understanding. For her to feel what I'd felt sitting here all night. Instead, she closed the notebook and handed it back to me. So what? I stared at her. What do you mean, so what? So he wrote pretty words in a book nobody could read. Her voice was flat. Cold. That doesn't change the father he never was. Sarah, he loved us. He just didn't know how to show it. No. She stood up, pacing the study. No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to let him off the hook because he wrote some apologies he never sent. I'm not letting him off the hook. I'm trying to understand. Understand what? That he was a coward? We already knew that, Marcus. I needed a father when I was being bullied in school. I needed him when my marriage fell apart. I needed him my entire life, and he gave me nothing. Words he never sent don't change that. I could feel anger rising in my chest. You're being heartless. And you're being naive. She turned on me, her eyes sharp. You know why you're forgiving him so easily? Because you got the better version of him. By the time you were born, he'd at least started trying. He didn't even do that for me. The words hit like a punch. I'd never thought about it that way. Sarah had 8 more years of our father than I did. 8 years before I was born. 8 years when he was even colder, even more distant. She saw the realization on my face and laughed bitterly. Yeah, exactly. You think it was hard having him as a father? Try being the first experiment. The one he practiced his silence on before he figured out how to be slightly less terrible. There are letters about you too, I said quietly. In the notebook. She froze. What? Letters to you. From when you were little. From your wedding. He wrote to you too. For a moment, she just stood there. Then, slowly, reluctantly, she sat back down. Show me. I found the section with her name. Handed her the notebook. Watched her hands shake as she started reading. The first letter was from when she was 7. Sarah asked me today why I never smile at her drawings like her friends' fathers do. I didn't have an answer. How do I tell my little girl that my own father taught me that praise makes children weak? That showing affection would make her too soft for this world? I'm ruining her, and I don't know how to stop. Sarah's breathing changed. Got faster. Shallower. She found the letter from her wedding day. I cried during your vows. I hid in the bathroom so no one would see. You looked so much like your mother, so capable of love, so free with your heart. Everything I'm not. I wanted to tell you how proud I am, how beautiful you looked, how your husband is lucky beyond words. But I just shook his hands and said take care of her. The 3 most inadequate words for everything I meant. The notebook slipped from her hands. She covered her face and the sound that came out was something between a sob and a scream. All the years of thinking she was nothing to him. All the distance she'd built to protect herself from his coldness. All of it crashing down in the space between one breath and the next. I didn't say anything. Just sat beside her while she broke. After a long time, she wiped her eyes and picked up the notebook again. Started flipping through more carefully. Then she stopped. What's this? I looked where she was pointing. A letter dated 6 months before his death. Addressed to both of us. But the sentence cut off halfway through. Do not open until... The rest was blank. And the next 3 pages had been torn out cleanly. What was he going to say? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. I didn't know. We sat there staring at those torn pages like they held the answer to everything. Then Sarah stood up and started searching the study. Drawers. Shelves. Behind books. What are you looking for? The pages he tore out. They have to be here somewhere. We searched for an hour. Found nothing. But in the desk, buried under old tax returns, we found something else. Hospital records. A diagnosis from a year before he died. Early stage Alzheimer's. Sarah's hands trembled holding the papers. He never told us. The pieces fell into place. The torn pages. The incomplete sentence. The diagnosis he'd hidden. He'd been losing his memory. Losing his words. Maybe he'd torn out those final pages because he couldn't finish his thoughts coherently. Or maybe they were never meant to be in the notebook at all. Sarah found something taped to the back of a photo frame in the bottom drawer. A small key. The photo was the only family picture in the entire house. Faded. From the day I was born. Sarah holding me as a baby. Mom smiling. And our father in the background, his face turned slightly toward the camera, and if you looked close enough, you could almost see something like a smile. There's a safe, Sarah said. In his bedroom closet. I saw it when we were cleaning out his clothes. We went upstairs together. Found the safe behind his winter coats. The key fit. Inside was a single sealed envelope. For my children, the words I should have said. Sarah and I looked at each other. Her face was pale. Mine probably was too. Do we open it now? She asked. I didn't know. Part of me was terrified of what it might say. Part of me needed to know more than I'd needed anything in my life. The envelope sat between us, holding our father's final words, and neither of us could move. Sarah opened the envelope. Her hands were steadier than mine would have been. We sat on the floor of his bedroom, our backs against the bed, and she pulled out several pages covered in his handwriting. Some of it was clear. Some of it wandered. You could see where the disease had started taking his words. She read the first line out loud, then her voice broke. I took the pages from her and continued. If you're reading this, I've finally run out of time. The doctors say my memory is fading. That one day soon, I won't remember your names, your faces, the very fact that you exist. The cruelest irony is that I spent your whole lives unable to express my love, and now I'll lose even the memory of it. I had to stop. Had to breathe. Sarah's hand found mine and squeezed. I kept reading. I failed you both in the most fundamental way a father can fail. I was there but absent. Present but unreachable. I fed you, housed you, taught you discipline and responsibility, but I never taught you that you were loved. Not because you weren't, but because I was raised by a man who believed love was weakness, and I believed him until it was too late to change. The letter went on. Details of his childhood we'd never known. Sent away at 8 to military boarding school by a father who thought boys needed to be hardened for the world. The last time he cried was at 9, after his mother died. His father had come to the school not to comfort him but to punish him publicly for his tears. Men don't cry, his father had said, then left him there for another year. I promised myself I'd never treat my children the way my father treated me. But I didn't know there was a middle ground between cruelty and silence. I thought if I wasn't harsh, wasn't cold, wasn't punishing, that would be enough. I didn't understand that children need more than the absence of pain. They need the presence of love. Then came letters to each of us individually. To Sarah. You were my first miracle, and I was so afraid of you. So small, so fragile, so dependent on me, a man who'd never been taught gentleness. Your mother would put you in my arms and I'd freeze. What if I held you wrong? What if my touch was too rough? What if you learned to fear me the way I feared my father? So I kept my distance, and you learned to fear my absence instead. I'm so sorry, Sarah. You deserved warmth and I gave you ice. You deserved comfort and I gave you competence. You've grown into a woman of such strength, despite me, not because of me. I'm so proud of who you've become. I just wish I'd told you when it mattered. Sarah was crying now. Silent tears that she didn't bother wiping away. To Marcus. You were my second chance and I wasted it too. By the time you were born, I'd lost your mother because of my emotional paralysis. I thought I could be better with you, less strict, less distant. But less cruel isn't the same as loving, and you grew up feeling like a disappointment when you were actually my greatest pride. Every painting you created, every time you chose art over practicality, every moment you proved you could feel and express what I couldn't, you were becoming everything I wished I could be. I never told you because I didn't want you to think I was proud of you for not being like me. But that's exactly what I meant. You escaped the prison I was born into. You're free in ways I never learned to be. My throat was so tight I could barely breathe. I kept reading. I've left the house to both of you. Not to sell, but to fill with the love it never had. Have dinners there. Bring your families, your friends, your noise and laughter and messy, beautiful lives. Hang Marcus's paintings on every wall. Host Sarah's book club in the living room. Make it a home in the way I never could. There was more. A trust fund we never knew existed. Decades of savings he never spent on himself. Money earmarked for my art studio and Sarah's children's education. He'd been planning for our futures in the only language he knew. Silence and sacrifice. Don't remember me as the father I was. Remember me as the father I wanted to be, the one who lived in these letters, who loved you desperately and showed it terribly. And please, don't let my failures define how you love your own children. Break the cycle I couldn't break. Be the warmth I couldn't be. The final page was different. The handwriting was shaky. Sentences fragmented. Words repeated. You could see him losing the ability to form thoughts. Fighting against the disease for just a few more words. Marcus. Sarah, love you, always loved, couldn't say, forgive. And then, instead of his signature, 2 small hearts drawn with a trembling hand. The first emotional symbol he'd ever expressed in 60 years of life. Sarah made a sound I'd never heard from her before. Something raw and broken. She took the letter from my hands and pressed it against her chest like she could absorb the words through her skin. He loved us, she whispered. He really loved us. He did. I wasted so much time being angry. So did I. We sat there on the floor of his bedroom, holding his final words, and grieved together. Not just for him, but for all the years of misunderstanding. For the warmth we could have shared if either side had found the courage to speak differently. For the man he was and the man he wanted to be and the distance between those two things that none of us could bridge in time. 6 months later, the house looked different. Sarah had been right to insist we keep it. The study was filled with my paintings now. Abstracts exploring the languages love speaks when words fail. The dining room hosted monthly dinners. Sarah brought her kids. I brought friends. The walls echoed with laughter and arguments and all the messy, beautiful noise our father had never allowed himself to make. The notebook sat in a frame in the living room, open to one specific page. Love isn't always in the words we say. Sometimes it's in the ones we couldn't. My latest gallery exhibition was titled Unsent Letters. 12 pieces exploring silence and expression and the ways we communicate love when we don't have the vocabulary. It was a sold-out opening night. I kept thinking about how proud he would have been. How he would have driven to the gallery 3 times and parked outside, too afraid to come in. Sarah was in therapy now. Learning to express emotions she'd learned to suppress. Teaching her children to say I love you freely. Breaking the cycle 1 generation at a time. I thought about him every day. Not the man who raised me, but the man I never got to know. The one who lived in the pages of that notebook, who loved deeply and showed it poorly, who died hoping we'd understand. And I did understand now. I understood that not every cold person is unloving. Some are just trapped in languages they were forced to learn. Some are victims of the people who raised them, trying desperately not to create more victims, succeeding only partially. I understood that my father was broken by his father, who was probably broken by his father before him. That cruelty and silence get passed down through generations like genetic diseases. That breaking those cycles takes more courage than most people have. I understood that he did his best with tools he was never given. That his best wasn't good enough, but it was still everything he had. I missed him. God, I missed him. Not the silent man at the dinner table, but the one who wrote letters at 2 in the morning. The one who cried at Sarah's wedding in a bathroom where no one could see. The one who drove to my gallery and watched through windows because he was too afraid his presence would ruin my night. If he could hear me now, wherever he was, I'd want him to know something. I understand, Dad. I forgive you. And I love you too. I just wish I'd said it when you could hear me. But maybe that's the lesson. Maybe that's what he wanted us to learn from his silence. Don't wait. Don't assume people know. Don't let fear steal your words the way it stole his. Say I love you while the people you love can still hear it. Because someday, all you'll have left are letters you wished you'd sent and words you should have said and understanding that comes too late to matter. Don't let that be your story. Learn from him. If this story touched you, hit that like button and subscribe to my Reddit diaries for more stories about the hidden battles within families. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever discovered something about someone after they were gone that completely changed how you saw them? What would you say to them now if you could? I read every comment. And remember, the people you love need to hear it. Don't wait until it's too late. Thanks for watching.